Okay, so now in this video we have a simple model, well, not you couldn't call it a model, but a simple situation for essentially to talk about subtraction. So this is a school bus, and basically there is a number of children in the bus, and it is essentially it's essentially the school bus when the bus is, it's after school and the bus is dropping the kids back at home, basically, right? So the bus is not collecting them, rather it's essentially dropping them back at home, basically. So in the beginning there is 5 children in the bus. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one kid, that they are all essentially in the bus. And of course when they get to his home, then they want to drop him, so he will leave the bus, right? So essentially in the first step, what happens, we had essentially 5 kids, we lose one of them, and what remains is essentially 4 kids, right? Now the 4 kids that we had that were left over here, we get to essentially to her house. Afterwards we get to her house, and we will drop her essentially at her home. And so essentially then we have 4 kids, we lose one of them, and then we are left essentially with 3 kids. The 3 kids, again, we lose one of them, and then we are left with 2 kids, right? Now the 2 kids we leave, again we lose one of them, and then we are left with 1 kid. And the 1 kid, essentially finally we lose her as well, and then we are left with 0 kids. So essentially this is essentially an example of subtraction, meaning that every time you're losing 1, meaning that, for example, 4 minus a 1 would be a 3, 3 minus a 1 would be 2, a 2 minus a 1 would be 1, and a 1 minus a 1 would be a 0, right? So that's basically this situation. And then if you were to essentially write it down, you can write it down this way. In the first step, essentially what we had essentially 4 kids in the bus, and then we lose one of them, and so essentially then we are left with 3 kids. In the second step, we have 3 kids in the bus, and we lose one of them, and then we are left with 2 kids. In the third step, we had 2 kids in the bus, we lose one of them, and then we are left with 1 kid. And in the fourth step, we have 1 kid, and then we lose the 1 kid, and then we are left with 0 kids in the bus, right? So that means that if you start with 4 kids, and if you go through essentially 4 steps, you will end up with essentially with a 0, right? Which is essentially nothing but this essentially you can represent this on a number line. You can say that this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. And then when you have 4 kids over here, that means you're here. When you lose one of them, you move back 1 step, and then you're left with 3 kids. So again, you lose one of them, so you move 1 step back, you're left with 2 kids. Again, you lose one of them, you're left with 1 kid, and then you lose the last one, and then you're essentially you will be left with 0 kids, right? So then basically for addition, the same number line, for example, if you start from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, what you will do is that you will start from 0, and then you move towards the right. This is for addition, right? So you start from 0, you move to 1, every time adding 1, you move to 3, you move to 4. This is addition. But for subtraction, you're going to move essentially in the opposite direction. This is subtraction. For subtraction, you're moving in the opposite direction. You start from 4 and then you will end up at 0, right? So now let's see what we have here. So this is again the same types of situation. For example, you're losing things, meaning that, for example, we have 6 frogs over here, 2 of them jump away, so we are left with 4 frogs, right? And so 6 minus 2 would be a 4, and then that's essentially the number of frogs that you're left with. Or for example, you have 7 balloons here, and then 2 of them get away. So when 2 of them get away, you have 7 minus 2, which means that you're left with 5 balloons. You have 9 bananas over here, and then the elephant takes away essentially 6 of them, which means that essentially you have 9 minus 6, which means that 3 of them are left on the tree, right? Or for example, you have 3 pots over here, and then one of them breaks, and then you have 3 minus 1, which is equal to, you're left with essentially 2 pots. You have 7 laddus. Laddu is some sort of sweet in India. So 7 laddus, you eat 4 of them, and you're left with 3 laddus. So 7 minus 4 is equal to 3. You have 7 balls over here, and then you take away 3 of them, you're left with 4 of them. So 7 minus 3 is equal to 4, for example, right? And then the same, essentially the same kind of thing, meaning that we have these questions over here, for example, Manisha has 9 bananas and she eats 3 of them. How many bananas are left? So 9 minus 3, 6 would be left. And there are 8 butterflies on the flowers. 5 butterflies flew away. So then 8 minus 5 is equal to 3 would be left, and so on and so forth, right? Now there is something also interesting again over here, and you might be able to use it somewhere in your mind. And this is essentially, these are basically dots card. So you make these cards over here. This is like, for example, a column or a row essentially on an abacus, and then you have 10 beads in a row basically, for example, in an abacus. And then on these strips of paper, you have 10 dots over here. And so then one of your friends or essentially someone is supposed to hide some number of those dots, and then you have to guess how many dots they have hidden under their hand basically. So essentially when no dots have been hidden, so of course then there's 10 dots on the strip, and then 10 of them, all the 10 of them are visible. So essentially the hidden dots would be 0, and then the visible dots would be 10, right? Now if you hide, for example, this is I mean, now we know that essentially a number of dots have been hidden, but we don't know how many. So to know how many, you can use subtraction, meaning that you can essentially still count the number of dots that are still visible. So that's a 3, a 6, and a 7. 7 dots are visible, right? So then if you write, and you know that there's originally 10 dots on the strip, so then 10 minus a 7 would be a 3, which means that this person has now hidden 3 dots under their hand basically, right? Or for example, in this case 5 dots are visible, which means that essentially 10, which is the total number of dots on the strip, minus 5, which is the number of visible dots, would be a 5, which means that the person has hidden 5 dots under their hand, right? Or essentially here 4 dots are visible, so then again 10 minus 4, meaning the total number of dots minus essentially the visible dots, meaning 10 minus 4 would be 6. That means that the person has hidden 6 dots over under his hand, which is again some sort of basically example for subtraction, basically something that you can do with subtraction. And I'm not sure if I talked about this before, but then I mean, at least I mentioned this, that basically for addition, on the number line you would jump from the left towards the right, right? That's for addition. That's adding, for example, 2 plus a 3. So you jump to a 2, and then you move 3 steps, and then you will end up at a 5, for example. That's basically moving from left to right. But because of the fact that subtraction is the opposite of addition, I mean, technically speaking, addition, that means essentially putting things together. Subtraction means taking things away. So they are, I mean, in principle, they are opposite processes, of course, right? So then if in addition you move from left to right on the number line, in subtraction you move from right to left on the number line, meaning in the opposite directions, basically, right? So which means that essentially from jump 3 steps back from 9, so that means that you're at 9 and you're starting at 1. Okay, so this is important. You're starting at 1, and I mean your number line starts at the 1, which is not that important right now in this situation. So if you start at the 9 and then you jump back 1, 2, and 3 steps, you will end up at the 6. So you essentially, how many steps did you jump back? You jumped essentially 1, 2, and 3 steps, which means that you start at the 9 and you jump back 3 steps. 9 minus the 3 would be a 6, and the number that you end up with. Or for example, if you want to say 7 minus a 4, you will start from a 7 on the number line, and then you will move, essentially you will jump towards the left, because you're subtracting, right? When you see the subtraction sign over here, you will start jumping towards the left. If you see essentially the addition sign, you will start jumping towards the right. Right? So then a 7 minus a 4 would be basically, you start at a 7 and then you have to jump back 4 steps. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 steps. You will end up at 3. That means that 7 minus a 4 is equal to 3. And then you can do, of course, all of these on a number line, for example. Now the thing is that, of course, all of these things, all of these examples that we have here, you can still use your beats model if you find it more. I mean, there is really nothing wrong with using any model that comes naturally to your mind. Some people are good at the beats model. Some people are comfortable with the jumping model. Some people, essentially, depending on the type of mind that you have, use whichever one comes more naturally to you. Meaning that, for example, if you have 7 minus a 4, if you want to do this operation over here, you can, of course, use the number line, or essentially the paper strip. You will have basically you will start, for example, from a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6 and, for example, a 7. And we have 7 minus a 4. So I will start at 7, meaning that I'm right over here, and then I have to jump, and because of the fact that I see the negative, the minus sign, the difference sign, or essentially the subtraction sign, I will move in this direction towards the left, basically, right? and then I will jump back 4 steps. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4 steps, and I will end up over here, which means that essentially these are my 4 steps. These are my 4 steps. This is the number that I start with, right? So this is the number that I start with. These are my 4 steps, and then basically I will end up at this number, which is 3 over here, right? So that's how you use the number line, or essentially the number strip, in order to do subtraction. Now, one more way that you can do it is that you can just simply use loose beats, or essentially put your beats together in groups of 10, for example, or in groups of 100, or in groups of thousands. For example, if I were to do the exact same operation over here as 7 minus a 4, that means I have basically 7 beats over here. So that's 2, 4, 6, and 7. I have 7 beats over here, and I want to take away 4 of them. So I take 1, 2, 3, and take away 4 of them, and I end up with 3 beats. So that's basically 7 minus 4 is equal to 3, right? Now you can and you can use essentially whichever models comes more naturally to you. There is nothing wrong with any of them, really. Or you can also, of course, you can even build your own model, meaning that you can basically combine all of these models together in any way that you want, and build essentially your own model for different types of calculation that you have to do. Okay. So that's basically all about subtraction. I'll see you in the next video, and thank you.